I'm Jeremy Brecker with the Labor Network for Sustainability, and in this installment of Strike, Commentaries on Solidarity and Survival, we will be talking about the unemployed versus the coronavirus depression. 40 million people or more have lost their jobs since the beginning of March, including those not actively looking for work. Nearly half of adults are jobless. While some of those initially laid off have returned to work, others who thought their layoffs were temporary have been reclassified as fired permanently. Professor Stephen J. Davis of the University of Chicago Booth School of Business estimates that 42% of recent pandemic-induced layoffs will result in permanent job loss. The level of unemployment is now comparable to the Great Depression, but it took barely 2 months instead of 3 years to get there. And because it was triggered by a pandemic, the response to today's depression differs significantly from the response to the Great Depression. In the coronavirus depression lockdowns, social distancing and other public health measures have presented unfamiliar barriers to many of the forms of collective action seen in the Great Depression. And in contrast to the early years of the Great Depression, in 2020, the federal government moved quickly to provide expanded unemployment benefits and supplemental payments, as well as a $1,200 helicopter payment for most individuals as part of a series of stimulus packages. Although the lion's share of federal largesse went to large corporations and financial institutions, the promise of these payments retarded initial mass organizing of the unemployed. Indeed, a Brookings study found that poverty actually decreased in April and May, the months following the start of the pandemic. The entire decline in poverty for April and May can be accounted for by the one-time stimulus checks the federal government sent out during these months and the expanded unemployment insurance eligibility and benefits. Getting access to unemployment and other benefits has been a different story. Millions of people were unable to get through to unemployment offices despite dozens or even hundreds of phone calls. Millions more were unable to get their applications accepted, and those who managed to apply faced long delays before their payments were actually received. The initial organizing of the unemployed has largely occurred in response to these frustrations with the process of applying for benefits. Online communities developed on Facebook, Reddit, and other social media platforms to provide advice and camaraderie to those having trouble with their applications. For example, a mother of 3 named Sierra Neal was furloughed from her job at a go-kart track in Las Vegas. When she applied for unemployment, an alert popped up that blocked her application from being processed. But the website offered no clear way to resolve the problem. She ended up creating a Facebook group to help Nevada residents applying for unemployment benefits. Her group gained nearly 7,000 members in a week. She recruited 9 additional moderators to help. By early April, they were fielding 200 comments per hour. The New York Times reported that many such groups developed around the country. Some are geographical, covering states or regions, like the Louisiana Coronavirus Unemployment Legal Advice Group. Others cover occupations like recreational vehicle workers, dog walkers, delivery workers, restaurant employees, court reporters, and Cheesecake Factory workers in Las Vegas. At times, these networks have spilled over into organized protest. In Zephyr Hills, Florida, a 59-year-old bartender named Kim Donnelly got laid off and tried to apply for unemployment compensation. But she found you call the phone numbers and all you get is, "We can't take your call right now." She learned from social media that lots of other people were having the same experience. She discovered a Facebook page called Action Group for COVID-19 Unemployment, founded by Kelly Powell, and decided to organize a protest with them. She told a reporter, "We're going to drive to Tallahassee on Monday at 2 p.m. We're going to meet at the Capitol because we're all coming from all parts of Florida. We're not going to get out of our cars. We're just going to drive around holding signs out the window. Try to get some attention to this situation." At the same time, they plan to host a virtual protest on the Facebook page for those who can't drive to the Capitol. And that was just a start. On May 1st, for example, a Florida newspaper reported, "Unemployed Floridians who've spent weeks navigating the broken system are now taking to the street to protest. A caravan of unemployed protesters drove up and down Kennedy Boulevard in Tampa on Friday, honking their horns with signs hanging from their cars. Many of the protesters Friday say they've run out of money and are living on credit cards and charity from relatives. They've gone 6 weeks without any unemployment benefits and say they're getting desperate. I am losing my home. I am borrowing money from family to get groceries," said Julia Shear of St. Petersburg. "I had to go and get $20 for my daughter to go get $13 of supplies to make this sign. It's ridiculous and it's criminal." Powell says she's not stopping until everyone gets paid. In Philadelphia in March, a coalition of local labor unions, worker organizations, and public interest law firms organized a campaign for its $5 to $10 million city emergency fund for workers left out of state and federal relief efforts, such as undocumented workers and those in the so-called cash economy. They also called for an expansion of the city's paid sick leave law. They held a digital low-wage worker town hall meeting with laid-off low-wage workers as speakers that was attended with 400 online participants. 10 of the 17 members of the city council attended the digital town hall, and many said they supported local relief efforts for low-wage workers. The mayor's spokesperson, however, said such a fund was not possible given the city's resources. May 21, the Philadelphia Unemployment Project organized a virtual town hall for the unemployed to get involved to put pressure on the governor and the Department of Labor to release our benefits now. No doubt, the future course of action by the unemployed will depend greatly on the future course of the coronavirus depression and the measures taken to counter and ameliorate it, which in turn will heavily depend on the course of the pandemic itself. But there is little reason to think either the pandemic or its economic consequences are going to go away anytime soon. Unemployed workers are even more structurally disempowered than those who remain in the workplace. They cannot strike, engage in slowdowns, directly confront a boss, or engage in other forms of concerted action on the job. Yet, as we saw in the previous commentary, Fighting the Great Depression from Below, in a time of mass unemployment and misery, with government aid blocked, the unemployed develop ways to exercise power through organization and direct action. Hunger marches, demonstrations, occupations of state capitals, confrontations with police and National Guard led cities and states and eventually the federal government to provide relief funds, public works jobs, and unemployment insurance. The action of the unemployed put significant pressure on government officials, labor leaders, and social workers that eventually changed government policy. The social dynamite represented by millions of impoverished, angry unemployed helped make radical change seem both necessary and possible. And the movement of the unemployed laid much of the groundwork for the public policy changes and labor organization of the years that followed. In addition to the usual obstacles to organization of the unemployed, the coronavirus depression presents significant additional barriers. Public health restrictions like social distancing and banning of gatherings make demonstrations, occupations, and other direct action tactics difficult, though, as we have seen, not impossible. The unemployed can't strike, but they can use socially distanced and online demonstrations, rent strikes, boycotts, self-help, and other tactics. The unemployed have shown a capacity for rapid formation and mobilization of networks. They have made effective responses to immediate needs, such as unemployment compensation delays and snafus. So far, these have not had mass participation. Only a small minority of the unemployed have been involved. The networks have generally involved particular localities, states, and industries, though a coalition of left groups tried to promote nationwide action around May Day. There is so far little definition of common goals or a common identity as unemployed, hardly surprising considering how new mass unemployment is. Common interests and the elements of a common program for the unemployed are not hard to envision. The unemployed need to resist pressure to go back to work prematurely under unsafe conditions and to be protected from retaliation if they refuse to do so. So-called non-essential workers need acknowledgement that by not going to non-essential jobs, they are making a sacrifice that helps keep everyone safe. That sacrifice needs to be recognized in some form of income maintenance, what has been called a social distancing wage. They need to have a voice in shaping future stimulus packages and to ensure their passage. They need free food, shelter, utilities, and medical care, or the cash to pay for them. Most of the organization and self-organization of the unemployed so far appears to have focused on overcoming the obstacles to actually getting the relief being offered by state programs and federal stimulus packages, and their denial to specific groups like immigrants and gig workers. Surprisingly, there appears to have been little action so far by the unemployed to affect the contents of proposed future stimulus packages or to ensure their passage. Networks of unemployed in various regions and industries have developed. Whether they will become a vehicle for affecting federal stimulus policy remains to be seen. In the early 1930s, the movements of the unemployed forced local, state, and national governments to make efforts, however limited, to address the needs of the unemployed. Whether their needs are addressed in the coronavirus depression is likely to depend largely on whether the unemployed organize themselves to demand it. To read this commentary, please visit laborforsustainability.org/strike.